for Glace Bay that brings on the issue of vision. And I mean, we've been working on a number of visions, and if you try to pull them together, the number one vision is making sure that the patient is first. It's all designed towards the patient to make sure that they're going to receive fair treatment for whatever ails them. We need to continue our investments in long-term care, which I think we have a clear strategy on what that is and where those investments are going to go into the future, and we will continue those, because on the backside of that, it will free up beds in our acute care system so we can actually use those facilities for what they were designed for, which is to provide acute care services like surgeries and treatments and therapies. And I think that's a very important part of my vision for healthcare into the future. Also, the issue of continue to invest in diagnostics, to continue to work on public health care and primary health care.
Order, please. Order. We've reached the moment of interruption. We'll now recess for 30 minutes.
We've reached the moment of interruption. The subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Clare. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Government encourages the Atlantic Lottery Corporation to embark on an independent review of retailer and retailer employee ticket lottery wins. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly pleased to rise in my place today and talk about an issue that has surfaced over the past couple of weeks here in Atlantic Canada. One that broke actually in the fall in terms of taking a look across the country when Fifth Estate developed their story around investigations primarily in Ontario. And of course, at that time, we had the case of Mr. Edmonds. And it was the CBC investigation, insider wins, and of course with Mr. Edmonds' case, it opened up a great deal of suspicion, of wonderment around whether or not all tickets were being checked properly, and of course then there was revelations that retailers were winning at a rate higher than the average player, and so when the Fifth Estate story came out, I think it started to put perhaps all of the lotteries right across the country in each province on guard and starting to look at the internal operations. And how they were administered. And for us here in Nova Scotia, as part of the Atlantic Lotto, we certainly saw just a couple of weeks ago that the revelation or the report that they gave indicated that certainly some things just didn't add up with the Atlantic Lottery. And I think at one point there were thoughts around this was being proactive, this was the thing to do, but I have a feeling that Fifth Estate was just around the corner and we had another story in the making. So about a week ago I started to ask for a review of the Atlantic Lottery. And it was based certainly. I had as soon as the story came out, and we had made some commentary on this and what we thought should be done. I started to get a number of emails and calls on this issue, and it was interesting that the average person, summed it up pretty quickly and rather quaintly when they said, they would say to me something to the effect that, look, I'll continue to buy tickets as long as I have the same chance as retailers. Because they were winning, of course, at a rate of 10 to 1. And we started to ask for a review, but it didn't get perhaps a great deal of pickup in the first week. But definitely a story that I felt needed to have some close scrutiny around it because there is a great deal of trust that we place in people who provide this service. And many people that did speak with me or email me, they said, and I found this quite interesting, that some people who had played for more than 10 years, and in fact, I think it was just in this house maybe today, a member told me that they had never, ever checked a single one of their tickets, which right off, of course, is one of the safeguards that any individual can employ at all times. But people told me that they never, ever checked their own ticket. They brought it into the store, and they asked the clerk to check their ticket. So again, complete trust, and lots of times it's with that store, that retailer has given us great service, but very often when we go in, there's a different clerk there. We don't necessarily know perhaps much about some of the clerks when we go to the corner store. So now, after the Ontario Ombudsman found, in fact, that in his report actually said that, Ontario government officials initially became aware of questions about retailers winning a disproportionate share of jackpots 6 months before the scandal at its lottery corporation became public last October. So again, that there were certain practices that I think have been known about for some time. So now we have the Ombudsman's report, and with his report, it was obviously a very comprehensive forensic type audit that came up with 60 recommendations. So if you have 60 recommendations about a particular practice, it certainly does call into question what has been going on. So the company KPMG have made a total of 60 recommendations to strengthen the provincial lottery system, and of those, the Ontario Lottery Gaming has already implemented 17. An additional 25 of those recommendations will be addressed by the end of June, and the remaining 18 will be operational as soon as possible. So there's no contest here. There's no challenge around what was discovered, and I'm sure that Atlantic Lottery can go down the road here of an investigation, and I'm pretty sure now that this is going to be coming about. That the government of Nova Scotia is going to ask that a review be done, an independent review, we hope, of Atlantic Lotto, because when Ontario finds out that there are a whole number of practices that are questionable, then I think it's only right that we here in Atlantic Canada have full insight into what has taken place and where we need to go to strengthen the system and make sure that there is full compliance of proper practices, and that Nova Scotians can indeed trust the system in which many go to play each week. In fact, there are about 730 Nova Scotians who are of age to buy a lottery ticket, and on the average, Nova Scotians spend about $285. And in fact, that translates into $210 million on ticket lottery sales, and that was for the fiscal year 2005-2006. So that money that people take a chance on in buying a ticket, people do want to know that in fact, everything is 100% in terms of how the Lottery Commission works on a week-to-week basis. So certainly I am pleased to hear from the Gaming Corporation in Nova Scotia and from the provincial government that there is going to be an investigation. And, I have, in fact, a lot of confidence in the corporation in Nova Scotia, in fact, that things, in fact, could be in full compliance and that the process is clean. But I think in order for Nova Scotians to have full trust, the investigation is, I'm sure, being welcomed, and look forward to hearing about how the process will take place. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my place.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to add some of my own thoughts here around this very important issue. And that being, while I recognize the government is looking to take on the initiative of a review process into the suspect winnings of more than 10 times the regular winnings of customers, I see a solution as being very simple, and although as I said, I do understand the need for perhaps a review process to expose potential fraud, if indeed there has been fraud committed here, but I see a most simple solution, and that one being putting in rules and regulations that clearly state retailers can't buy lottery tickets from their own establishments. I mean, currently, we don't know what any review will show, but certainly I wouldn't want to be a retailer today in the province of Nova Scotia having a customer come in my door and me being surrounded by that cloud of suspicion. I mean, what we have done is we have lumped all retailers into this package here, and for that, I think a simple solution, adding security for both retailers and customers, would be very low tech, very low cost to provide that type of security to consumers. And I think too, establishing an arm's length body that actually polices and manages lottery sales in this province perhaps would be a good idea. You know, the Gaming Corp certainly has a mandate, and that is to promote their products and services to consumers out there. And to see them managing and policing just doesn't seem to be working, and this is certainly a case in point where we're now looking at finding ways to police better the gaming activities of consumers and retailers in the province. So I would strongly suggest that as part of the review process that the minister looks seriously at putting forward regulations that will actually help retailers by establishing those very clear rules that they don't buy tickets from their own establishments, and that certainly would take away any suspicion that there has been any fraud perpetuated by retailers in this province. And I think we all recognize that in games of chance, in lotteries, that there will always be someone out trying to beat the system. And certainly there would be fraudulent activity in some of that wanting to beat the system. I'm not sure if I want to suggest that there are retailers here in this province that have been fraudulent, or have they actually just come up with ways of beating the system? And one example of that would be when you see at a corner store the big jar of poll tickets. Those poll tickets come in batch lots. Those batch lots are not only numbered as to how many tickets are in that lot, but there's also the guaranteed winnings that come with those scratch and win tickets. So if a retailer or a staff person in the store is watching that jar on a daily basis, they know how many tickets have been pulled and won in any particular day or week. And when that jar gets down to the last 75 tickets, and the staff person or the retailer has recognized that actually all of the winnings haven't been taken out of that jar, doesn't it make sense, if you want to beat the odds, that you're going to scoop up the rest of those tickets, and you can be guaranteed a win of $500 or $600 or $700, whatever the guaranteed win is. That is not fraudulent in the sense that we think of fraudulent. That is simply beating the system, and whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't think that we can lump those retailers in the fraudulent scheme that we're discussing here. Certainly, the Atlantic Gaming Corp has started to put in all of the necessary checks and balances for consumers so that they feel more secure when they go in and they check their winnings. But to really get rid of that suspicion, that taintedness that has happened with every retailer now in the province, doesn't matter how many checks and balances are in place, there will always be that cloud of suspicion. And I think the most simple way to remove it, the most cost-effective way of taking care of this problem is simply saying retailers should not be buying tickets from their own establishments. And I understand that the Conservatives in Ontario are actually calling on the McGuinty government to actually look at that as one of the possibilities. So it's certainly not outside of the choices that this minister has in this province. And also, I would strongly suggest, too, that part of the review process look at the establishing of an arm's length body that actually looks at managing and policing, so that we don't find ourselves in this position again in this province within our gaming practices here. So again, a review process certainly may be a good one, and to look at what went wrong and where we go from here. But I think the solutions are quite simple, and I would encourage the minister to keep that in mind as he walks through this process here. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak on this issue this evening. I want to begin by assuring the House and the members in the House that the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation has been working on this issue of retailer wins for several months, and I've been involved in discussions with them back in the fall when the first report came to light in Ontario of a retailer who had scammed a customer who had really won a ticket, and it was an elderly person, and the retailer didn't let the elderly person know and took the winning ticket for themselves. They have been looking at this issue since the last fall. In fact, the day after CBC aired its investigative report in Ontario last fall, the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation issued a press release announcing an internal review of all its security policies and procedures related to lottery wins by retailers at Atlantic Lottery. In that release, President and CEO Marie Mullally said, while we have full confidence in Nova Scotia retailers and in ALC security systems, we want to be proactive in ensuring that our policies and procedures are the very best in the country. And so as a result of that review that was launched back fall internally by the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation in conjunction with the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, an analysis was completed by an independent statistician on March 14th of this year, showing that retailers claimed 10 times more prizes than would be expected in the 6-year period between January 1st, 2001 and December 31st, 2006. And that independent review, that finding was released to the public as all the members will be aware. So to address that problem, the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation and Atlantic Lottery Corporation have implemented more than 20 improvements in the lottery system to provide more protection for players, in addition to measures already in place. And these new procedures include continued education for players about the importance of treating every ticket as a potential winning ticket, including signing the back and asking for validations at retail locations. Having lottery terminals make a different sound to differentiate between winning and non-winning tickets. So if the person is hard of sight, they can differentiate by the sound that they have a winning ticket. A complete consumer's tip strategy was implemented in January and February of this year, and now all retail wins of over $10,000, Mr. Speaker, are fully investigated by ALC's internal auditing team and security and compliance team to ensure that those wins are legitimate. Self-serve machines across Atlantic Canada that allow players to check their own tickets before bringing them to the retailer for verification now display the amounts won, not that it's simply a winning ticket, but how much that ticket won, so that the person knows themselves the amount of the winning. And ALC is adding customer-facing screens. They're rolling this out, Mr. Speaker, on lottery terminals, which will show the amount won as the ticket is being checked by the retailer. And these we hope to have in place by the end of June of this year. ALC is working also, Mr. Speaker, with vendors to examine other innovative solutions that may bring new best practices to the industry at large. They've already started dialogue with some key vendors on thinking outside the box and on technical solutions to enhance player security. ALC retains external auditors on an annual basis to review system processes pertaining to security, monitoring, and control to identify potential issues and to provide recommendations that can be implemented by the Atlantic Lottery Corporation. So it's clear, Mr. Speaker, that the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation and the Atlantic Lottery Corporation value security and integrity, and that's exactly how it should be, and all members of the House would agree with that. ALC and Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation have reacted proactively to address this issue starting back in October, and they have, through press releases, informed the public about this. And that process, Mr. Speaker, as I repeat, happened long before the lottery retail wins report by the Ontario Ombudsman that just came out yesterday, I believe. So I'm pleased to be able to tell you that of the 18 recommendations amongst the 23 that the Ontario Ombudsman report referenced, the 18 that would apply to our situation here in Nova Scotia, they're already being worked at, some are already implemented, some are in the process of implementation, such as those customer-facing screens on the machines. When any person buys a lottery ticket here in the province, we want them to feel fully confident that the system is fair, safe, and that they have the same odds of winning and of claiming their prize as anyone else. Because, Mr. Speaker, as everyone would agree, the issue of fairness and allegations of fraud is one that threatens the very raison d'etre of the Nova Scotia Gaming Corporation. If the system is not safe, if the system is not secure, it puts into question, it undermines the very rationale for having a government control of the gaming industry here in Nova Scotia. And that's why, in addition to all these measures that have been taken internally, I have launched a full comprehensive review of the policies and procedures at the Atlantic Lottery. My department will lead this process as the independent body responsible for responsible gaming in the province of Nova Scotia, and we will bring in the necessary expertise from outside our department to conduct the review, and we will report the findings, which will be made fully public. The process, Mr. Speaker, will begin immediately. The goal is clear. It's the goal that we are all supportive of. We're committed to doing everything that we can to restore the confidence of Nova Scotians in the lottery system and to making sure that Nova Scotians are confident and that they maintain that confidence. So this review will begin immediately, and the expertise that's needed outside alcohol and gaming as part of the Department of Environment Labour will be contracted with those experts, and these findings will be made public to Nova Scotians as soon as that report is done. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. That concludes this evening's late debate. The House shall now recess momentarily, and it shall resume itself into the Committee of the Whole House on Supply. The House shall resume at 6:30.
Chair will now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And when I finished off, I was talking about nurse practitioners, and certainly, you know, it's a role that is developing here in the province, and I think certainly from all the health personnel that I speak with, it's one that's very welcomed. And as the minister said in a previous question, that in fact it is continuing to expand, and the scope of practice for them is getting well defined. And so he also spoke in terms of additional monies, I think about 180,000 in DH3 in the Indianapolis Valley. And I'm just wondering, is there a plan for that at this time, or is there still some flexibility as to where we may see them show up in the coming fiscal year?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. Again, welcome to another riveting half hour or so of questioning on the estimates for Department of Health. And I again thank the member for Kings West on bringing forward the issue of nurse practitioners and asking how we're using them. Using is the wrong word, really, utilizing their services within the healthcare system. The scope of practice is becoming well defined on exactly how that nurse practitioner works in concert with their physician, what they are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. And from the bill that we brought forward in the House back in November, really defines and expands the scope of what that nurse practitioner can do and how the collaboration actually can happen. What we're trying to continue to do is continue those annualizations, continue to invest in the district health authorities and their needs for the usage of nurse practitioners, and really through the business planning process, we expect the district health authorities to continually ask us for more and more our nurse practitioners to utilize them in collaborative practice settings. So looking at those areas, whether of the hospital setting or in our estimation better in the community setting, to use them in concert with other professionals like physiotherapists, like massage therapists. I mean, you could put a whole bunch of people together and really provide those wellness clinics and those kinds of things. And we want to see some more of those things happen in the province, and we'll continue to fund those as best we can. Again, this year's increase is from 19 nurse practitioners to 25.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to move that one little step further, certainly one of the areas that I think a nurse practitioner in our area is probably, well, it's probably several areas, but one that has some perhaps immediacy about it is the Grandview Manor, where you have over 200 people in that institution, and a doctor who probably won't be practicing too much longer, makes, you know, frequent calls there, and again, if you take into account how much each of those calls will cost the system versus having a nurse practitioner there. And I'm not asking the minister to place one there tomorrow, but what I'm really interested in is there any kind of interim report and assessment of how the nurse practitioner position has gone at, I think, Northwood, right. North Hills is down my way as well, but at Northwood. And I wonder if the minister had any comments to make on how the position of nurse practitioner has been executed, and what is the general acceptability and so forth in that context.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the member for Kings West. You know, I think we've had a fair amount of success with our pilot project with Northwood on using a nurse practitioner for primary care within a long-term care facility or long-term care setting. I think it's sort of the comments I'm hearing are reminiscent to the comments from the member for Digby Annapolis on the usage of nurse practitioner in the Briar Island area. And I think wherever we tend to establish positions for nurse practitioners, we tend to get the same raving reviews on the kind of services that they provide. Because not only do they see patients, you know, in the old patient comes to visit, you see the patient, you diagnose them, you send them on their way. You know, there is a whole wellness piece that continues to work with the health of a resident, continues to work on making that individual better over a longer period of time rather than just seeing someone, prescribing them a drug to help whatever the ailment may be and send them on their way. So, you know, the type of collaboration is far changing. You know, we've been seeing a lot of good reviews on our Northwood project. Also looking at what we're trying to do in making sure that our seniors and people in long-term care facilities receive the services they require. There's been some work being done with the chiefs of staff of the district health authorities to make sure that we have physicians to work in long-term care, whether it be on a regular hopefully be on a regular basis. The continuing care branch, as part of the strategic framework project, has received an extra $1.35 million 0607 and 0708 to establish physician leaders in each health district. The implementation will begin in this first quarter. So where, you know, the problems we had in getting physicians to be in long-term care facilities was really the time it took to go from their practice to the facility, so they weren't being paid for that travel time because they were probably on fee-for-service. Of course, the visits, the collaborations, or the consultations with the resident was longer, so they weren't getting the same return or the same amount of remuneration as they would have if they would have stayed in their clinic and seen patients that way. And what we've done is provided funding for that travel and really taken into consideration the different kind of work that they have to do in a long-term care setting. So Mr. Chair, you know, just to basically quickly sum up on that one is that I think we've done a number of really good things. Within this budget, there is still some funding towards that, and we will continue to change the model, if you will, of how nurse practitioners work and how Nova Scotians expect to get healthcare services.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. That was lengthy, but also had some couple of very concrete pieces in there that I think should prove to be very valuable for our district health authority as we see that nurse practitioner role develop further. One of the areas that I want to go to now, and it's one that I first of all I do want to at this time commend the Deputy Minister who appeared before a standing committee a couple of months back, and certainly her candidness at that time about the long-term care bed conundrum, I guess, that we have in this province, and how we are probably several years behind, and as much as can be launched and put forward in terms of the number of beds and the long-term care strategy that we see unfolding in this province, there's no question that in the Valley, in our area where we do have that population cohort at one of the highest percentages of 65 plus, the number of communities, Digby, Annapolis, there's one other that have 25% of their population already at 65 and over. And so we know, Berwick, I'm sorry, is the other. So we know that there is an immense coming crush in terms of beds. And we saw that during the last couple of months. In fact, one of the doctors who I consulted with on this, he didn't have the stats, but it was his view that there were as many days of code purple at Valley Regional as there were days without for January and February of this year. They went through a very difficult time, and I remember on one day, of the 98 beds, 28 had patients that could have been moved out to some of these sites. I'm wondering, Mr. Minister, you know, certainly pleased, and I know residents in my area are pleased that that Middleton will gradually see a development there. But I'm wondering if there is any look at some contingencies for placement. And I say this from a real worry position, and I hate even hearing this being voiced in the medical community or the larger community that, you know, yes, we had that wonderful piece of equipment, the MRI machine, you know, unveiled, I like that. So anyway, but you know, I hear, will we be able to keep our specialists if Valley Regional can't operate as a full regional hospitals, get people in and out of the OR in a timely way, and keeping those so many beds that are in transition. And I've dealt in my office. I mean, you know, obviously we can't use names here, and you don't want that anyway. But you know, I've dealt with 3 or 4 in my office that have been in Valley Regional for 3 months or more, and they're ready to. They want to get home. And I'm just wondering if there's anything going to be on the contingency side of dealing with long-term care beds.
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to the member for Kings West. You know, there's a number of things going on sort of at the same time in order to address the needs of long-term care in the province. You know, but I want to go back just a little bit of you know, we are sort of behind where we should be. And the best reasons why, and I just wanted to sort of to lay that out, is that probably 7 years ago, and Alan can attest to that, is that probably on a daily basis, he would be getting calls from our long-term care providers who were on the brink of bankruptcy. There had not been an increase in their daily rates. There had not been any injection of funding for a variety of different things in their homes for over a decade. Okay, so from that point to now, when we finally were able to make that large investment, you know, there's been millions of dollars invested into our long-term care facilities in order to put these groups, these private nonprofits, these private and these public nonprofits back into a place where they can say that they are surviving. And it hasn't been now until we can actually move that next step forward, which was, you know, working towards the construction of those 832 beds. And Mr. Chair, you know, we also have to say that we've got these beds, and once those are complete, it is our vision to implement 200 new beds per year after that. So by the time that 10-year or that plan is worked out, all the beds would have been in the system, and we'll be able to respond to the needs of long-term care in the province. The interim piece, and there has been a number of $1 million available to help district health authorities to expand beds at places like Northwood, Melville Gardens, Peters Place, and some other various places where we feel our pressure is today. And, you know, we have monthly meetings now, and even almost bi-monthly, twice a month, where we have meetings with our CEOs and president and chairs of the boards to know exactly where they are at that point in time, to look at what those pressures are and how we can help alleviate some of those issues. So, you know, if we look at the placement as of April, our alternate level of care placements where DHA 1 will be getting, I believe, is what we're talking about, or the contingency plans, the extra beds, would be about 5 beds for DHA 5, 12 beds for DHA 6, 9 beds for DHA 7. IWK is looking for 6. DHA 2 is looking for 5 for Roseway. DHA 2 is also looking for, I believe, 5 mental health beds as well. DHA 4 looking for 3. DHA 9 looking for 4. So, you know, trying to find within the hospital acute care system the availability of some beds in order to provide a level of care that is better than staying in the regular hospital population, but really is not where they need to be, which is in a long-term care facility. And just quickly speaking, you know, a snapshot in time of the people in waiting for long-term care facilities, or people waiting to placement by district. So I'm guessing that this is numbers of people, of ALC people, sitting in hospital. So these are numbers as of February 14th. 33 people were waiting in DHA 1, 38 people waiting in DHA 2, 50 people waiting in DHA 3, 72 people waiting in DHA 4, Cumberland DHA 5, 19 people, and oh, there we go. Pictou County, there were 52, Guysborough 51, Cape Breton District, and they've had some challenges on getting beds available too, 234, and of course here in Capital Districts we've been talking about the larger number of 380 people waiting for placement in long-term care beds, which is a Nova Scotia total of 929. Which also underlines another issue, is that even with the 832 beds, we're not envisioning wiping out the wait times at this point. We need to have some kind of wait list there so that our utilization can continue to stay in that 95 or 96 to 100%. I know I provided an awful lot of information there. DHA 3, back in June, we'll be looking at some extra ALC beds, or will require a review because of renovation costs. DHA 3 is looking at 9 ALC beds, or expansion of 9 of ALC beds in that district.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the areas that I've talked about in the past is home care. And first of all, just a quick question around this. I know that there has been some discussions about having the DHAs look at administering the home care program, and I'm wondering if the Department of Health is possibly looking at a pilot DHA, or advancing perhaps more of the administrative and logistical requirements that home care sometimes struggles a little bit. But I would have to say there have been some improvements, without doubt, but I'm just wondering if that's still something that the Department of Health would be continuing to possibly implement.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the member from Kings West underlines probably the most important problem we have in DHA 3, which is the issue of home care utilization and the wait list that we have there. Currently, I believe number of clients waiting as of February 2007 is 180 people are waiting for home care service in that district. We are seeing some improvements, though, and I want to commend the new nurse manager for the VON, where apparently she's done some fair amount of work in addressing the issue here. We still have some recruitment issues of getting the right amount of people to be able to work and provide that service. The issue of devolution is really what you're talking about, is basically trying to take the programming, which right now resides in Halifax, and let the decision makers in the district health authorities basically take that over. So really you have a continuation of care from acute system into the long-term care system, and back and forth if need be. And that's been a want from the district health authorities for quite some time. And we're looking at the possibility of piloting that maybe in a couple of districts. But right now, you know, we haven't made that plan within this budget. We'll continue to manage it as best we can at this point. Because of that gap, I think we would like to see that gap close before we would sort of devolve that off to the District Health Authority and maybe get that full complement up. The other issue, too, for DHA 3, you know, we're looking at the benefit of a daycare program or an adult daycare program that we would implement as soon as it can be set up. Which would take would allow people to stay in the community a little bit longer as well, so that that caregivers can actually have that respite time, or that time to do other things. So there are a number of issues that we're really working on with DHA 3 to try to alleviate the pressures that they are seeing today.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Minister, for that very specific and concise review of, again, a very challenging area, home care, but one, again, that continues to grow in demand in the province. What I would ask, and I guess from kind of a provincial perspective, but also, of course, has impacts on DH3, and that is the training of LPNs and attracting nurses to VON home care, is that able to keep up, or is it perhaps also one of the stumbling blocks or one of the difficulties around a greater degree of home care being provided?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I know that our nurse policy manager, our nurse person within the department has been working quite closely with the district on the training options, making sure that we continue to have that one step up on the LPN training programs, the RN training programs, so we can try to attract those individuals to the Valley. But I also think it has a lot to do with making people, and it's sort of again, I talk a lot about societal changes, but you know, we have to understand that our society will change a fair amount over the next number of years, and especially when it comes to care of seniors, and because our seniors numbers will rise so dramatically. So we need to continue to work within our school systems and making communities aware of the option of being a continuing care assistant, being an LPN, being an RN, and their needs. So I know there's been some specific strategies focused at DHA 3, yet we haven't found that final solution that would alleviate some of the pressure that we're seeing, especially in home care.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the Minister. There is some talk now in our area, in the Greenwood-Kingston area, because of the transitional population in the Air Force. Of course, there are many people without a family doctor, and there is talk about a community clinic being developed in Greenwood, and I would expect that it would probably be the base doctors and perhaps nurses and again nurse practitioner and other healthcare providers that would staff that facility. I'm wondering, would that come under again the auspices and the of the province in terms of such a setup?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Greenwood provides, gives us a bit of a problem, because there are a lot of those personnel that would be able to receive services, and their families be able to receive services through the armed forces directly. But because once you go beyond those primary services, they do fall within the purview of the Department of Health in order to receive those tertiary or the secondary and tertiary services that would be at the regional hospital or here in Halifax. But we have been working quite closely on a number of initiatives with the armed forces, whether it be here in Halifax or in Greenwood and some other sites. So maybe what we could do is bring that issue again forward, and we can discuss this one to see what maybe the proposal might be from the community and from the armed forces community, to see what their request would really be, and how we could basically share the services that they do have with maybe some expanded services, which would be nurse practitioners, which we could fund through the DHA. So I know there can be some pieces that we could work together, but we would also require having the Department of National Defense or the Armed Forces to work with us as well on this issue.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly pleased with that response from the Minister. It certainly opens the door for discussions and possibility of executing a plan for a much-needed service with Forces personnel. Just one further question to finish up with, and then my colleague from Digby Annapolis has a couple of questions to the Minister. One of the areas that, again, in many parts of the province, is we hear of nurses putting in a considerable amount of overtime, and certainly demands in some of our hospitals that there are nursing shortages. I've heard of cases in the last few weeks of nurses doing 30, 36 hours of overtime. And of course, you know, that's it's a pretty demanding occupation to be putting in that kind of overtime. I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration by the department perhaps about structuring, you know, the RN program, not in any way challenging the degreed nursing program, but some type of mentorship and longer clinical experience in the hospital. You know, my wife, who was an RN, now retired, talks about how much time nurses in the nursing schools and how much time they put in on the floors. That was pretty cost effective for the province, and I'm just wondering if that can be both a cost saver and that valuable clinical experience to, in fact, perhaps even put out again, you know, a better quality of nurse, and not in any way to diminish the training they get now, but again, one of those enhancements when you have that wide experience in the hospital.
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will take this opportunity quite quick at this point to thank our RNs for the service that they provide to our system every day. It is a tremendous amount of work that they provide, working those 12-hour shifts, providing the patient care. I can tell I'm starting to get long in the hours here. Patient care, and you know, we need to find sometimes, I think, better utilization of these very important professionals and see how they can work, you know, more in tandem with some of those other professionals that we're talking about. Better working relationship with those LPNs, better working relationship in the long-term care with CCAs or whatever that level of worker is as well. You know, the nursing strategy is one that is a living document as well, that we continue to update as time goes on. You know, we have had some tremendous success through it. You know, we have attracted and kept over 250 odd nurses in the province as they've graduated through their programs at the various sites around the province. Of course, Kenville has a number of seats or positions for the clinical experience for nurses that are either at the Dalhousie program, the Yarmouth site of the Dalhousie program, through I believe through Antigonish as well. And of course, we're also in negotiations right now with the University of Cape Breton on bringing that program onto a full program rather than the satellite site of the Antigonish program. We retain at this point over 80% of our new graduates, which I think is a good number. We would like to see it better. 6 years ago, we were only retaining 50% of our nurses. So, you know, I think we've made some great steps, but again, it's a living document, and we'll continue to update it and try other strategies in order to retain nurses in our system. But again, Mr. Chair, you know, we need to find that balance between the competencies and the scope of practice of the RN and how that works in concert with the scope of practice of other professionals like LPNs.
The Chair will now recognize the Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis. You have about
Thank you, Mr.
11
Chairman.
minutes.
I won't keep the minister too long. We don't need him in the ER tonight after all the hours you've put in. So we'll soon let you out of here, that's for sure. I want to talk about Digby a little bit. As you know, down in Digby, our shortage of doctors is growing, and it's going to grow. We got 6 doctors there now, and we're expecting probably before this year's up 3 more to leave. We're very concerned about that. I've had questions put to me, information put to me too, about Cuban doctors. My daughter, just this past year, this winter, was down in Cuba and went in and had to go visit a doctor. I've been down there a few times myself. I've never been that unlucky, but she said she was lucky to be able to meet one of these doctors. He spoke 4 different languages, very, very thorough, done a wonderful job, and she thought he was great. Cuba, as of August 2005, had 66,567 doctors. They made a little deal with Venezuela here a while back for a little bit of oil, gave them 20,000 doctors. They're still putting them out down there, day after day after day, doctors and school teachers, and they're not doing too much. It's a shame because them young doctors, if they don't practice, I guess you lose it after a while. Use it or lose it. Here we are in Digby with no doctors. I mean, and all these doctors down in Cuba, wonderful people. I've been down there quite a few times myself. And wonderful people, smart people. They're all well educated and speak many languages. Some people said it could be a language barrier, but I don't believe that. Anyone I met down there could speak very fluent many languages. And anyway, has this country, or even this province, or the minister himself, looked into getting doctors from the country of Cuba? Has that been done or been looked at?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And maybe what I should do is maybe take a bit of time and go on a road trip with a member for Digby Annapolis. Maybe that would be a good thing to do right now. But quite seriously, I don't think there's been any specific programming through our department or even through Department of Immigration to target Cuba as a possibility for getting those physicians. The challenge, I think, would be as well is that I don't know how freely the residents of Cuba can actually travel to other jurisdictions because it is a communist state. Let's not forget that one. Cuba, and it is an interesting thing that I learned when I had had an opportunity to visit there. I was not a health minister at that time, nor was I in anywhere near this house. But I had learned at that point that there's actually probably 1 doctor per 100 people in Cuba. They pump out an awful lot of physicians in that state. What we could do, though, and what we continue to do with foreign trained doctors is through agreement with immigration. They are working with the department and other departments to coordinate shortening the time it takes to get credentials in Canada depending on what you're trained on. It could be an engineer, could be a physician, could be something else that we need here in the country. But also, what we can do is maybe through the program that we have through the College of Physicians and Surgeons called the CAP program, which reviews the credentials of the doctor. Okay, so they would come to us and we would put them through a sort of a battery of tests to see what their competencies are. We would then provide them with sufficient training to give them their Nova Scotia credentials. And we've had a fair amount of success with that, and I know Alan had some CAP assessment programs, but through the 2 cohorts at this point, we've had the retention of a huge number of physicians. What we're finding, though, is that we had felt, and other jurisdictions had felt, that there was a fair amount of these foreign-trained doctors in different jurisdictions. They could be in Toronto, they could be somewhere else, and they can come to our province, get that training, and we're hoping they're going to stay, right? But we're finding we're not getting the uptake as we thought it was, so we're actually dropping the numbers down to something like 30 people or 30 physicians per cohort that would end up going through the system and getting the mentoring from other physicians or through that CAP mentoring program that we have working out of the Yarmouth Hospital. But I would say, maybe there's an opportunity that we should be looking at, which would be states like or countries like Cuba, to see if there's an opportunity to basically take some of those physicians. But I just wonder sometimes, especially with dealing with Cuba, we have a good relationship with Cuba on receiving some of our ambulances. I don't know how that return would be on taking people, in this case physicians, away from that country. but it's something we could look at anyway.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you. In the meantime, you know, we have a shortage of doctors, and I guess it sounds like to that answer will be a while before we get any out of Cuba. So in the meantime, we're going to have 3 less doctors in the Digby area, and especially in the emergency room. We have the emergency room shut down now nearly every weekend. And my phone rings steady, and I get a lot of feedback. We have a nurse practitioner on Long Island down there, and the people down there think the world of her. I think probably they think more of her than the doctors do of her, because there's so many of those people on that island doesn't come off that island anymore to see the doctor. And maybe that's part of the problem. I don't know. But we don't look at a nurse practitioner as taking over any doctor's position. We look at a nurse practitioner to put in that emergency room in Digby to help the doctors. We believe, and the people down there believe, 99% of them believe that a nurse practitioner would work fine in that ER while we are looking for doctors. Is that something that the minister is going to look into for us in the Digby area?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and yeah, that is definitely something that we're going to look at for Digby. I know I've committed to a meeting with the community to work with the medic group and the councils and see if there's some things that we can do collaboratively in trying to figure out a way to get more service out of the Digby emergency. But the challenge I think we have there is that even if we did bring in a nurse practitioner, that nurse practitioner has to work in collaboration with a physician. So we really have to figure a way in order for them to work collaboratively or in concert with. 3 minutes to go, yes. Thank you very much, member for Glace Bay. Really watching the clock, and I thank him for that. But Mr. Chair, I think that what we really need to do as well is try to use the model that we have in Long Island. And, you know, because the approach is so different. You know, the two contrasts, you have the two contrasts in your writing. You have the primary health care model, which is working so well in Long and Briar and part of the Neck. And then you have the old version, which is ER, wait till you're sick and hurt before you go, right? And what we really need to do is continue to work in communities so that we have less people showing up at ERs for minor things, and we use ERs for what they're designed for, which is to see patients that are acute. So I don't necessarily want to use up our nurse practitioners and putting them in the wrong setting, because I think they can do a world of good working in our communities, providing that primary health care that the people in Long Island have come to appreciate and embrace. And really what we should do is be getting the member for Digby Annapolis and maybe some community members from Long Island to do a commercial supporting primary health care and nurse practitioners in our community, because I know they do it so well there. Maybe I'll leave the last comment to you.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis with about a minute left.
I would do that. I would do that because the people, the feedback I get down there about this nurse practitioner is something else, you know, and if you're not there to witness this and hear it, you know, that this woman will go out and do house calls, and she'll stay with them for a half an hour. They love it, especially the elderly people. They can't get over. They haven't had this. There used to be a doctor down there 30, 40 years ago that done this, and they feel this has come back to them. And very cost efficient, I might add, you know. So I guess it is. It's a great thing. So if I can help you anyway in promoting this, I certainly will. So anyway, thank you very much.
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Well, thank you for the 30 seconds of close up. maybe what we can do is look forward to the questions on Thursday. I know the NDP will be starting off, I believe, with some questions. And I also look forward to maybe responding to some questions on another department which is under my purview, which is the Office of Acadian Affairs. And I know the member for Halifax Fairview has said that he would maybe like to have a bit of that debate in French. So we'll see how we make out with that one. But I thank the member for Digby Annapolis as well as the member for Kings West for their questioning this evening.
Order, please. The time expired for debate in Committee on Supply is now expired. Call on the Deputy Government House Leader, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee do now rise to report progress and beg leave to sit again on a future day.
Chairman of the committee reports.
The committee's made progress and begs leave to sit again.
Considerable favorable progress, indeed. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader on government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
I'd like to call Bill number 146, Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act.
Bill number 146, the Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act. The Honourable Member for Halifax-Shabukto.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in our Assembly, we engage in a process of mutual education. Occasionally, we manage to engage in a process of mutual amusement. This late in the evening, and I suppose I should start off by turning my mind to the amusement aspect. I guess I have to think of myself as the after-dinner speaker here, and there's a long-standing, well-identified tradition that the after-dinner speaker starts off by either telling a joke or an amusing story, and it's a tradition I intend to respect. But before I actually tell the story, I want to explain why it is that the after-dinner speaker starts off by telling such a story. Now, it seems to me that there are at least a couple of reasons, perhaps three. One is, of course, to tell an amusing story indicates that the speaker is a pleasant person and someone that you're happy to get along with, someone you might want to take out for a drink sometime, and of course that's a serious thing to signal by that method. I suppose the other is that if you enjoy the story but not the rest of the speech, then of course it's not a complete waste of time. But I think there's a third reason why it is that speakers might indulge themselves in this way at the beginning of their talk, and it's with the hopes that they might actually find a joke or an amusing story that embodies the point of the speech. And if they can do that, then it's probably easier for the audience to remember the point of the speech if they can concentrate on the amusement. Those are the reasons, and now on to the story. Mr. Speaker, a couple of weeks ago, I found myself at the annual general meeting reception held by the Bank of Nova Scotia. You know, of course, that the Bank of Nova Scotia was started here, and despite the fact that its main offices are now in a very large tower in the city of Toronto, in the financial heart of Canada, it maintains the wonderful tradition of holding its annual general meeting in Halifax every second year. And it seems, for some reason, I get invited to this event whenever that occurs, and I have to say I enjoy going to it. But going there the other day reminded me of the first time that I was invited to that AGM, and it was just after I'd been elected in 1994 to Halifax City Council. And I think the whole of Halifax City Council, the 12 of us and the mayor, were invited to come to that reception. And in fact, it was an even more elaborate reception than it's come to be in recent years. It was actually a sit-down dinner. And several of us from the Halifax City Council, this was a couple of years before the amalgamation, and Walter Fitzgerald was the mayor of the city of Halifax. And Walter and I and several others were sitting together at the dinner table. After dinner, there was a reception in another room, and there was an open bar, and in fact, it was a time before there was any serious regulation of smoking, and there were boxes of cigars out on the tables, free for the taking. So a couple of 100 of us were moving from the main dining room into the reception room where these boxes of cigars were there. I was walking with Walter Fitzgerald, who at some point suddenly spied the boxes of cigars. Well, Walter scuttled forward as fast as he could and went up to the boxes of cigars, and he grabbed a large number of them, and he turned around. And as the rest of the people were coming into the room, he went up to them and handed out cigars, and he said, "Hi, I'm Walter Fitzgerald. I'm the mayor of Halifax. Have a cigar," he said. Well, now, you know, well, I guess I can tell a second one. I mean, even now that I'm on the subject of cigars, I don't know if it was Walter Fitzgerald or one of the other members of council who put up the sign in the men's washroom over at City Hall, the one that said, "Please don't throw your cigar butts in the urinals. It makes them soggy and hard to light." But I'm not sure who that was who put that sign up. But I think I tell these two stories, Mr. Speaker, because they in fact bear out the lesson, and one of the points that we have to think about. The first is miss no opportunity. Grab an opportunity if it presents itself. And I think that's what the minister has done here. When the public attitude moved to the point when the public showed that it was manifestly interested and concerned about an environmental issue, it's what happened to the minister over there and his government. They said, "Here's an opportunity, let's grab it."
Order,
And
please.
you know, oh, I beg your pardon.
Speaking of grabbing opportunities, would the honourable member permit an introduction by another honourable member?
But I guess I will. Oh, all right.
Not enough time to have a stogie. The honourable member, the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for allowing me the opportunity to make an introduction. Mr. Speaker, through you to all members of the House, we have in the East Gallery Herman Long. Herman Long is a business person in the Goshen, beautiful Goshen, Guysborough County area. Anyway, Herman has been a former municipal politician and warden of the District of Guysborough. Very well respected in the community, and I would ask everybody to give Herman a good round of applause.
Indeed, we welcome our guests here to the gallery today, and I want to thank the honourable member for permitting time for that introduction. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabukto.
Pleasure to accommodate my colleague, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. You know, it's not just a question of grabbing opportunities. It's the lesson of the second of the little stories I told, because of course a lot of what we're dealing with when we're dealing with sustainability or environmental issues is we're dealing with waste. Don't commit waste. Let nothing go to waste. Let's pay close attention to seeing if we can make maximum use of our resources, I think is an underlying thought of what it is that many of us in the environmental community have preached and lived for many years. Now, it seems to me that when the government finally comes to its realization as manifested in this bill, that sustainability is important and that something can actually and should be done about it, starting now, then we should welcome this. And I have to say, I welcome this bill. I welcome this bill. A number of us are going to speak to this bill, but I assure you, this is not anything of an attempt to filibuster. We're merely wanting to get on the record our support for this kind of legislation and to move ahead with it. That's our intention. We have observations to make about it. We have comments to make about it. Might even have some amendments to suggest about it, but Mr. Speaker, fundamentally, this is exactly the kind of legislation that we support, that we would have wished to have seen on the books in Nova Scotia many years ago. So although I can't really say thanks are due to the minister. I can certainly say that congratulations are due to the minister for finally realizing that this is something that has to be moved ahead with. So the minister has certainly grabbed an opportunity that presents itself. We can but hope that in our efforts to support the bill, we won't be committing waste, because the question is, what will happen to this bill? What will actually happen to it? Will the measures that are laid out, indicated as targets, actually become a manifest reality in our province? Will it happen? That's the key question. Because when we read this bill, what we see are targets that are 5 years, 10 years, 20 years into the future. Now, I have no objection to thinking long term. Let's think long term by all means. But let's take steps as immediately as we can to begin to move in the appropriate directions. The fundamental fact about sustainability and legislation to deal with sustainability in our province is that the opportunity has been missed, not just year in, year out, but decade in, decade out. And it's true not just of the present government opposite, but of Liberal governments before. Mr. Speaker, I've been in this business of being concerned about sustainability for a long time. My personal history in it goes back over 30 years, almost 35 years. I know that occasionally I'm referred to by some of the members opposite as the member of the legislature for the Ecology Action Centre. I've heard that actually said. I don't mind that tag. I don't mind that tag at all. It's in fact, an expansive view of the world, and an important one that the Ecology Action Centre and other sustainability organizations have taken over the years. I spent a term as Executive Director of the Ecology Action Centre in the early 1990s, and I've been a member of the Centre since the early 1970s. I became associated with it about a year or so after it was founded. And the Ecology Action Centre, although it dates back to 1971 or so, was not a lone outpost or the only environmental organization in Nova Scotia or Canada at the time. Nor was it alone in terms of its environmental thinking. It was formed in reaction to the fact that, or in recognition of the fact, that there was already an Earth Day that had been promoted across North America. So environmental thinking was already well advanced by 1970. And the legislation in response to this was already beginning to be passed in some jurisdictions around the world. So make no mistake, we've been very slow here. Now, I know this is not the first environment bill that we have in Nova Scotia. Of course, Nova Scotia has an Environment Act that goes back to 1995, and it's quite a comprehensive act. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when I look at the bill that we have in front of us, and I look at the existing Environment Act, it's not at all clear to me that we couldn't have achieved exactly all of the things that are being talked about in this bill using the existing legislation. I don't see the existing legislation as being in any way deficient. I suppose it could be improved here and there, but in terms of fundamental flaws, there aren't really any. And I'll tell you what environmental law is basically about. There are two aspects to it. One is it's regulatory. It sets standards. It caps emissions. It talks about pollution releases and so on. It sets standards. It's regulatory. That's the first aspect in general of environmental law. The second aspect of environmental law is that it engages in planning. And the chief tool of environmental law is environmental impact assessment. A wonderful tool, a terrific tool, much like municipal planning and zoning, in the framework of an official plan, which we call in Nova Scotia a municipal planning strategy. The idea is to think about projects, to think about our community, to think in advance about something that we may be engaging and doing, and consider what the possible negative consequences might be. And if they're unavoidable, don't go ahead. If they can be mitigated, then mitigate them. That's what environmental impact assessment is about. That's really what land use planning and zoning is about as well. So those are the two aspects of environmental law, broadly speaking, regulatory and environmental impact assessment. Both of them good things, both of them set out in the existing Environment Act of the province of Nova Scotia, and a statute that provides us with the tools that could have been used to achieve what we see in Bill 146. So make no mistake, again, I'm happy to see Bill 146 come forward. It looks more specific. It has a nice title. It's a focus for debate. It offers us the opportunity to look at some of the contemporary issues or their manifestations, and it actually sets some targets. They could have been set under the Environment Act, but it actually sets some targets that we can look at and move towards. But will we really get there? That's the worry that I have. The historical evidence, based on the fact that people who have paid attention to this have spoken for decades about what we could have accomplished, and yet we haven't, does not speak well to whether we will really move progressively and aggressively in the correct direction. The existence of a solid piece of legislation that already exists in Nova Scotia as an effective framework for this kind of action and targets, and yet has not been acted upon, also does not speak well to our commitment as legislators as a whole to actually moving towards a sustainable basis. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, when I look at this bill, I recognize that it has no proclamation date. It's fine to set targets in a piece of legislation, but if the bill itself is never proclaimed, even if we pass it here, which I'm hoping we will do very soon, will it even be proclaimed? I've heard some other honourable members in talks just recently complaining about and listing bills that have passed in this legislature and not been proclaimed. Well, will this bill be proclaimed? It's not clear to me why we don't have a definite date in it, right in the text, for its becoming effective. So it seems to me that this, along with the fact that just over decades, the administration of this province has not moved in the appropriate direction, gives me pause. I worry about that. And when I see missing from this bill an effective date for the bill itself, it gives me pause. I look at this and I ask myself, is the government serious? Will they really move ahead? Or will they simply look ahead the 10, 15, 20 years to the targets they're thinking about and say, in the classic way of many elected officials, I'm sorry to say, that'll be for someone else to worry about. Unfortunately, that's what it tends to look like. And that, of course, is exactly contrary to the idea of sustainability. Sustainability says, let's take action now, let's think now, and act now in ways that will not have negative consequences for the next generation, for people in the future. It doesn't say, let's put off to the future taking some action, let our children worry about it, let the next administration worry about it, let someone else do it. I'll be out of politics, I'll be retired, thank you very much. That's not good enough. It's just not good enough. So I start by congratulations to the Minister for recognizing that there's an opportunity to do something and being prepared, apparently, to move in that direction. But unless it's real, unless there's something tangible, unless there's something that really indicates a commitment, I feel skeptical. And so should we all. So should the public. Again, we have every intention of voting in favor of this. We want it to go through. We want it to go through quickly. We favor progressive environmental steps. But we worry. And it would have helped if there were some kind of tangible steps that really the Minister were taking that could really kind of move ahead and indicate that there was something active that had been done. And let me tell you another limitation that I see that worries me. I listened to the minister at second reading. I listened to his talk. His remarks were not very long, but he covered a couple of essential points about this bill. And this is another aspect of what gave me some pause, made me a little worried. He identified this bill not so much as being about long-term sustainability in some comprehensive way, but as really being about climate change, and he characterized this bill as, quote, our response to climate change. Well, in a way, I'm with the minister. I think climate change, global climate change, is a serious problem. I think it requires urgent action. But sustainability, of course, requires thinking about a whole range of other issues. Climate change, if approached seriously as a problem, associated with one of our vital life support systems, the air we have to breathe, can be quite comprehensive. It can lead to measures that would attack problems that exist in a whole range of the different sectors of our economic and social activity. And I hope the minister means it broadly. I hope the minister does intend to move ahead and grab the opportunity to move ahead in all those different sectors. Let's just focus for a moment on what those sectors are when it comes to climate change, and ask ourselves whether this bill really engages with them. Now, we know that the basic problem is the emission of greenhouse gases. The scientific analysis tells us this. The consensus of scientific opinion indicates that the problem is essentially the way we've chosen as humans on Earth to structure our lives. It has to do with our industrial and quasi-industrial activities. Well, in Nova Scotia, greenhouse gases come from essentially three different kinds of activities, you could say. I mean, one is electricity generation, another is transportation, and another is the buildings we live and work in. And it's about 62% of our greenhouse gases come from our electricity generation. The reason it's so high is that we are one of the top 3 provinces in Canada in terms of our percentage reliance on burning fossil fuels, particularly coal, to a lesser extent oil, to generate our electricity. The remaining 28–30% is probably split between the transportation sector and the building sector. Transportation, it's pretty clear. Vehicles mostly run on gasoline or sometimes on diesel, and their greenhouse gas emissions. Buildings, same kind of question. How do you heat them? How do you cool them? Are they built in a way that's oriented to the south and west so they can take maximum advantage of passive solar? That isn't the law in Nova Scotia. Is it going to be the law under this bill? Not so clear. How do we heat the buildings? How do we cool them? Is it required that we do something different? Well, the federal government is moving to establish national energy codes. The federal government hasn't grabbed for itself, I might say, the jurisdiction or declared for itself the jurisdiction over those things, so that when a national energy code is adopted, it's more a guideline. It's usually up to the provinces to decide whether they want to put in place through the building code acts that we have or through local municipal bylaws, incorporation by reference of the national codes that have been worked out. We're moving very slowly in that direction. A lot more needs to happen. But here's the problem. When I look at those 3 sectors, and I take the minister and his legislation at their word that they want to engage with global climate change, It's not obvious to me that the transportation sector is really seriously engaged with here. It's not obvious to me that the building sector is even engaged with at all. And when it comes to the electricity sector, the history has been so bad, that there's every reason to worry that relatively little will be done. When I look at our electricity sector, it seems to me clear that Nova Scotia Power, as a privatized entity, privatized in 1992, under the leadership of a predecessor to this government, for no clear public policy reason, is continuing to drive the agenda. When it does that, what I mean is, and what it means, is that it moves ahead in what it sees as its own corporate interests, its own best corporate interests. As a privatized utility, it wants to pay profits, dividends to its shareholders. And it's done that. Every year since privatization, about $100 million has gone out in profits as dividends to shareholders. Since 1992, that's almost $1.5 billion. We're coming up on $1.5 billion paid by Nova Scotians that has gone out in dividends to shareholders. And that's money that could have either gone to pay down debt if it had stayed as a Crown corporation and have eliminated that, or it could have gone to improve safety, it could have gone to improve working conditions, could have gone to improve the transmission and distribution system, or it could have gone to improved emissions controls and movement towards a renewable basis for generating our electricity. But it hasn't. It went out as dividends to shareholders, and let me tell you, those shareholders are not Nova Scotians. That's not money that is just being circulated around inside our province. As a company whose shares trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange, that company is widely owned and held mostly outside of Nova Scotia. So that money flowed out of our economy. We in Nova Scotia are the customers, we're the ones who pay the rates, but those dividends went right out of the economy. Thank you very much to those who decided to privatize that utility. But that company is driven by those interests, not necessarily by the same kind of public policy interests that we should be driven by here. When we think about it, we have to think about global climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. We have to think about the particulate matter that comes out of the stacks. We have to think about security of supply. We have to think of a variety of things. But you know what? The world is changing, and it is well within our technological knowledge to see our way clear to making fundamental changes in every one of those sectors, even if we just think about energy and global climate change, and we think of it in terms of electricity and transportation and buildings and how they're heated and cooled. The obstacles to change when it comes to achieving sustainability are not generally the absence of scientific or technological knowledge as to how to live our lives better. The barriers to change have been unwillingness to change, have been, I have to say, willful blindness to change. And that's true in all sectors, in energy, in agriculture, in mining, in forestry, in the fishery, in how we structure our communities. The barriers to change are not the absence of knowledge of how to do things better. I'm not saying perfectly, I'm saying better. And in many instances, much better. I mentioned earlier that I spent a term as director of the Ecology Action Centre in the early 1990s. I thought to look up a document that I was involved in writing at the time. It was at one point the fashion amongst provinces to have roundtables on the environment and the economy. We've revived ours. It lapsed for quite a while. We've revived ours now. In that fashion, following the lead of the federal government, which had a national roundtable on the environment and the economy established around the late 80s, maybe early 90s, and has continued to have one, prompted Nova Scotia to establish its own, along with a lot of other provinces. And in its early days, in 1990 or so, the Nova Scotia Roundtable on Environment and the Economy began to look at the different sectors of the Nova Scotia economy and look at ways in which things could be done differently. The Nova Scotia Environmental Network, which was an umbrella group for environmental organizations in Nova Scotia, still exists, the NSEN still exists, got together and presented a brief to the Roundtable. It's called Building a Green Nova Scotia, a submission to the Nova Scotia Roundtable on Environment and Economy, and it's dated 1991. I was one of the main authors of this submission. I was minded to go back and look at it, to see what it was that we were thinking in 1990. I have to say, it stands up well. It stands up well to contemporary analysis. It deals with all those sectors. It deals with the agricultural sector and the forestry sector and mining, and it deals with tourism and communities and energy. Now, let me just read you a little small extract from what it said about energy. This is from the summary section at the end. The Power Corporation, it says, should be amended to make reduction and use of alternative energy sources a part of its mandate. Scrubbers should be installed to reduce acid rain causing emissions, and the province should adopt a 20% reduction in CO2 emissions as a target for 2005. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to point out that this was a good 6 years before the Kyoto Accord. And we had identified, in Nova Scotia, the environmental community had identified not the -5 or -6% level that became the Canadian national commitment under Kyoto. We were saying at the time that we should adopt a target in 1991 of -20%. And that meant -20% compared with the levels that were prevailing in Nova Scotia at that time in 1990. And we suggested that that was achievable by 2005. Here we are in 2007. Been no reduction, year in, year out. There's continued increase in our greenhouse gas emissions here. So even if we take the minister's bill as being focused, as it clearly is, primarily on climate change, I think you can understand now why I don't necessarily want to say thanks to the minister. I want to say congratulations to the minister for finally waking up to the fact, that CO2 emissions are a serious problem and that something needs to be done. The question for all of us, even those of us who have never been the government, the question for all of us in this chamber is, where have we been? How could we have let so many years go by without taking serious action on this? Year in, year out, the problem was not the absence of knowledge. It never was. If in those years an informal group of people in the environmental community trying their best to educate themselves could read around and come to the conclusion that there was a serious problem that had to be tackled and could identify the substance that was the problem and set a reasonable target. Just remember, that was a 15-year target for action. This wasn't a crisis at the time. It was seen as a looming crisis, but we were able to identify it. The problem wasn't absence of knowledge, and we didn't keep this document to ourselves. This document wasn't a secret document. This document was submitted on behalf of the environmental groups in the province of Nova Scotia to the government's own roundtable on the environment and the economy. That's the think tank that the government established for itself to advise it on what it should be doing. And nothing. Nothing. So this is a real problem. Mr. Speaker, we want things to be done. Let's be clear, we definitely want things to be done. We think they have to be done. And to be completely clear about this, to be completely clear, this is not an option. This is not something that we can act on or not, and it won't make any difference. Make no mistake. There will be fundamental change in each and every sector of what we persist in calling our economy. My fundamental view is that the economy exists for the benefit of people, and it's not the other way around. It's not that people are just inputs into the economy. But if we want to persist in analyzing our lives in terms of economic sectors, this seems to be the accepted language, I have no doubt that fundamental change will take place, because it will have to take place. There will be no choice. And here's the scenario. The scenario is, if you just think in terms of energy, that some further disaster will take place. And the choice is, do we take positive action by using our brains and looking forward and making the right choices and take steps to minimize or avoid dangers, or do we wait for the dangers to overwhelm us and then perhaps do something? Because make no mistake, there will be disasters. There will be floods. Think Louisiana. Think Bangladesh. At some point,
Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Finance on a point of order.
Would be interested in adjourning debate in the near future.
Thank you. Well, not a point of order, a point with a suggestion. The Honourable Member for Halifax Shabukto.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when I was encouraging the government to look forward into the future, I had more than 10 or 15 minutes in mind. But if by the near future he means now, then I'm certainly prepared to do that. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to completing my remarks fulsomely and upon a future occasion. I move adjournment of the debate, Mr. Speaker.
So move the Honourable Government. The Honourable New Democratic Party House Leader, the member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Opposition
thank
business.
you. We'll be moved adjournment to meet at the hours of 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. tomorrow, and after oral question periods put by members, we will be calling Bills 132 and Resolution 2111. I now move adjournment, Mr. Speaker.
We stand adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you.